Good evening and welcome to Confident Nutritionist Dynamic Iridology Circulatory Case Studies. I am really excited to have you with me tonight. Thank you for coming. Even though we're only going to be together for about 90 minutes, I promise to make this time well invested, and I hope you have blocked off 90 minutes because that's about how long this is going to take us this evening. And the information continues right to the end, so please do your best to stay with me. Regardless of whether your specialty is nutrition or herbology, I know that you will leave our session today with some information that you can use with your very next client. One of the things that I've learned over my years in the wellness industry is that excellent healers keep on learning. They know they don't know it all. So congratulations for being in that small minority of healers who strive to continue learning, who strive to have the best available for your clients, and who always try to give the best to your clients. I am excited to have you with me tonight. I would love to get to know you just a little bit. So there is a chat box or a question box that I would love it if you would interact with me. It's often difficult to get vocal interaction going because of background noises, or some people are participating from their phone or from a tablet or some other device that they don't have audio available on. So I'm going to ask you to be typing things into the questions box so that we can interact together. I would like to know what your background is, just so that I can tweak this program on the fly to make sure it meets your needs. What training do you already have as a holistic practitioner? Do you have nutrition? Are you a herbalist? Are you a homeopath? Are you a naturopath? Do you do body work of some kind? Maybe you do energy work, or maybe you're just starting out and you don't have any certifications under your belt, but you're really excited to learn. So if you would just share quickly just a little bit about who you are and what your background is, I would appreciate that. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to just type in 5 or 6 words and hit the send button. In order for you to get the absolute most out of our time together, I really do ask that you play all in. So when I ask for some feedback, please give it to me, and that will just help me to be able to make this even better for you. And as the answers come in, I will take a quick peek at them, again, just so that I can tweak things on the fly. Now, I also would like you to add to that, if you have nutrition as a background, are you affiliated with any professional organizations? So you might be with the IONC or the CANNP or CanPro. If you are a herbalist, you might be affiliated with the American Herbalist Guild, or in Canada you might be affiliated with the Canadian Herbalist Association of BC. You might be a member of some other professional organization for the holistic practicing that you do. So I would love to know what organizations you are affiliated with as you type your answers in for me. Now, regardless of what your background is, and before we dive into looking at these case studies that I promised you, I want to spend just a few minutes going over why you need iridology in your wellness practice. The first challenge that you might be facing, the first thing that might be happening in your practice, is that you might not actually know exactly where to start in your recommendations. You might not know how to set therapeutic priorities. Now that's really important, because sometimes when we are with a new client, and if we haven't been taught how to figure out where to start, we kind of wander around and meander around, and we don't feel very confident when we're doing that, and our clients certainly don't feel confident in our abilities when they see us doing that. Oftentimes, this is all complicated by the fact that we use really lengthy intake forms that ask all kinds of questions that are relevant only to maybe 5 or 10% of your clientele. And the other 90%, those questions are just a waste of time. So we don't want to be using that kind of an intake form that asks so many questions and gives us so little really valuable information. The second thing is that you might find that in the scope of your practice, you spend a lot of time outside of your client time doing research and program development for your clients. And that can be a challenge because you're probably not being paid for it. It's important to know that the way we were taught to write reports in school is not the way we do them in a clinical practice. And that may sound odd, but I know that when I teach, I try to teach very practically, when you see this, what questions would you ask? But I know that when we go through different processes in different schools, we write these great big case histories, these big case studies. And it shows that we know everything about everything, but it doesn't show that we know how to break that information down into little bits, into usable information for our clients. Now that's really important, because if we've spent all this time unpaid writing these massive reports and we give that to our client on their second appointment, we effectively overwhelm them with so much information they don't need to come back. And I've had this happen way back in the early days where I would literally fire hose my clients with so much information that they didn't need to come back, or they didn't want to come back. They either were able to extract the 2 pieces of information that they wanted from everything I'd thrown at them, so they're good for the rest of their lives, see you later, or they looked at everything we talked about and they went, I could never do that. I'm so out of here. Whoa, I don't know what you think I am, but I'm not that perfect. And that neither of those things helped my client, and neither of them helped my business. Do any of these things sound familiar? If you can see yourself in any of these 3 things, raise your hand. All right, I mean, click the little raise hand icon there, because you know I can't see you where you're at raising your hand. Excellent, thank you. Yeah, these are very, very common. Now, how do I know that you probably struggle with these? Because I've been there myself. You should have seen how complicated the homework was that I used to give my clients when I first started out. They would book a 1-hour appointment. 3 hours later, they were still with me. That's not very respectful of their time. And I would give them so much homework that if they came back a second time, I was lucky. It was really hard to build a business back then because I was doing it all wrong. The second way I know that these are likely challenges you're facing is that I've interviewed a lot of nutritionists, herbalists, and other holistic practitioners, and almost all of them have been there too. If you're there now, you are not alone, and you don't need to stay there. So stick with me, because I'm going to give you some ideas of how to break out of that tonight. Who am I and what qualifies me to share this fabulous practice-changing information with you? Well, I have a lot of experience under my belt. I don't know how old most of you are on this call, but I've been at this as a holistic health coach since 1981. I'm a master herbalist, have been since 1983, nutritional consultant practitioner with the IONC since 94, and in 2016 I affiliated also with the CANNP to get my natural nutrition clinical practitioner designation. I certified in iridology in 93, and I certified as a comprehensive iridology instructor in 2016, but I will tell you, I've been teaching iridology since the late 1980s. I've kept up with the research, and boy, have things changed. You really want to be studying with someone who's up to date. I've been a teacher of wellness professionals since 1985. You know, way back then, way back in the 80s, there were not very many classes or courses. There was a few things by correspondence. We had Jethro Kloss's Back to Eden. I don't even know if that book is still available, maybe in a used bookstore. We didn't have the internet. We certainly didn't have webinars, you know, and, you know, everything, it was so different. Telephones even had cords back then, right? I mean, I'm talking Stone Age. So I knew way back in the mid-1980s that as I learned things, I needed to teach. I needed to get the word out. I needed to support local practitioners because we couldn't reach globally. Now these webinars that I teach reach all over. I did one this morning and I noticed that I had people attending from the UK, from France. I've had inquiries from the Philippines, from Australia. So with webinars now we could reach worldwide, and that's so exciting. But in all this time, the thing that I'm really, really proud of is being the wife of one. We've been married for 37 years now, mom of 7, and grandma of 7. And in all of that time, I've made a lot of mistakes. And I'm happy to share those mistakes with people to prevent them from making the same mistakes. I've invested a lot of money. I've done all of this while having and raising our 7 children. And I've made a lot of mistakes along the way, spent money on classes and with mentors where it didn't help me in any way. I've spent less money really smartly with mentors and workshops that could help me move forward. So my goal is to save you time, save you money, save you frustration by teaching you things that I have learned about iridology and about business to make your progress as you work on building your business or changing your businesses or expanding them in different directions so much easier. If you would like to know what I know and where I've been and what I've learned, raise your hand for me. Yeah, all right, perfect. Then you're in the right place because we are going to do some of that tonight too. Of course, you know that tonight we're talking about iridology, and iridology can help you eliminate intake forms, except for your waiver release form. I don't know what the laws are where you live and where you're practicing, but I do know that I've had a lawyer, my business lawyer, tell me I should have everyone sign a waiver or release form at least on their first appointment, if not a new one annually. And he said, including your mother. I was like, whoa, because, you know, that's the kind of society we live in, and it's very sad. But we don't need those lengthy intake forms, and I'm going to start teaching you tonight how to use iridology to replace your intake forms. Good for the environment, saves on paper. It can help you start creating deep rapport from the moment you start your consultation, instead of starting with you looking down to read that awful intake form. Right? Because if you have a client who's filled out 3 or 4 or 5 or 20 pages of intake and they come in, they're looking down, or you're looking down rather, at that form, reading the information, trying to figure out what question to ask now, trying to figure out how to put this together. But eye contact is actually the fastest way to create rapport, right? I mean, if you've ever been to a medical doctor, they usually have that little holder outside the exam room door, and that's where the receptionist tucks your file as she shows you into the room. And then the doctor comes in, he grabs the file. Instead of standing in the hallway and reading it for a minute to figure out where we're at and get up to speed, he opens the file, opens the door, he's looking down as he comes into the room. He doesn't even look you in the eye for how long? Right? No rapport, no rapport. Iridology can help you do a core assessment in less than 5 minutes, and I'm going to show you that. I'm going to prove it to you tonight, that when you know your stuff, you can actually do a core assessment in about 90 seconds. And in that core assessment, you will then know the right questions to ask. That's replacing your intake form. Prioritize what needs to be done first, and create a therapeutic priorities list for future consultations. Because the idea here is to give your client what they need for the next month or so, doable chunk of homework that they can be really successful at and see results with, and then they come back and they get the next piece of homework. We want them creating lifelong wellness habits, not flash in the pan kinds of things that aren't going to last. We are going to eliminate your unpaid homework time. You will never, with iridology, write another report on your own time. You'll get your work done in your client sessions. How does that sound? Does that sound good? If you would like to get all of your work done in your client sessions and not have to work on client files after a session, raise your hand. All right, thank you. And we'll help you stop overwhelming your clients. Clients don't like to be overwhelmed, because if they are overwhelmed, they will not come back. I guarantee it. And so if that sounds too good to be true, I'm going to demonstrate how easy this is throughout the next hour and a quarter that we're together. With Iridology, you can literally gather that base of information, let it teach you what questions to ask. The assessment becomes a rapport-building intake conversation without wasting client time to fill out 2 or 3 or 20 pages of intake. Yeah, I've actually interviewed a practitioner who uses 20 pages of intake. I couldn't believe it. I wouldn't fill that in. I simply wouldn't. No way. And maybe that's just me. Maybe you would, but I wouldn't. I recently spoke with another practitioner who confessed that she had just spent 3 hours with a client instead of the 1 that had been booked and paid for. So as we were talking, she and I chatted about why that had happened and why it was really not a good idea for anybody, not for the practitioner, not for the client. And this is what we came up with. A couple of things. The first one was, yes, she was helping the client, but she didn't get paid for those 2 extra hours. And I don't mean to sound like I'm money grubbing and mercenary and all that, because I'm not. But the fact of the matter is, if you're only getting paid for 1 out of every 3 hours you work, then you are soon going to lose your thrill for the work. You're going to lose the love. You're not going to have enough money to pay your own bills. And you're going to decide, I'd be better off getting a quote-unquote real job somewhere else. So we know that we love to help people, but you know the other thing that happens when we do that 3 hours for the price of 1 is that it devalues what we do. People begin to expect it. Word gets around. You spend that many hours with this client today, next time they book an hour and you're done in an hour and you say goodbye and they're going, hey, wait a minute, where's the other 2 free hours? Or you spend that 3 hours with someone, they tell their friends, you should see how good she is. You know, she only made me pay for 1 hour, but I spent 3 hours with her. Pretty soon, the friends are calling saying, yeah, I want one of those appointments like you did for so-and-so because I want 3 hours of your time instead of just 1. Right? And then it's really hard to break that cycle. People get cranky when you start cutting back. They think that, wow, are you ever cheap? When you're not, you're being reasonable. Point number 2 is at the beginning of the appointment with that client, the client complained about how her arthritic hands hurt filling out 3 pages of questionnaire. So, you know, 3 pages is too much for some people. I have some clients who are so arthritic that I will have them dictate their name, address, phone number, and I will only have them sign the page. I will do all the other writing for them because I'm not here to inflict pain. I'm here to help them, and so I just want to be as kind and gentle as I can. So I'm going to start teaching you today how to avoid giving away 3 hours for the price of 1, how to get rid of those lengthy intake forms, but in order to do that, you are going to need some equipment. Yeah, there are fancy, super high-tech, $5,000 cameras that we use for iridology, and I have one. In fact, this is my baby. I use it with every client. I love it. I love, 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 love it. But I'm betting that most people who are just starting out in iridology don't want to spend $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 on a beautiful piece of equipment until they know they love iridology, right? I can't imagine that anyone would just say, I'm going to drop that much money for something that I don't know anything about yet. So I don't want you to start there, because that's not where any of us started. I didn't start there. Nobody started there. Where we all started was right here. A high-quality pen light, you want one that has a very white light. A medical pen light is great. A jeweler's loupe or some kind of a magnifying glass. And a lighted magnifying glass. I really like my students to have all three pieces for various reasons that we will get into when you're in my actual classes. We don't have time to get into everything here, of course. And so with this one, this is from Amazon, and it comes with 3 interchangeable lenses of different powers. That's a really beautiful thing, because I think it's a 3x, a 5x, and a 10x or something like that. And again, the lights are right here, and the lights on this are LED pure white. They are gorgeous to work with. And so when I'm just getting my bearings, I'll use the 3x. When I sort of figured out where my landmarks are in that eye, I'll swap in for a higher power. And then if I really want to see a detail that's tiny, I'll swap out for the 10x. Great, totally portable. If I want to cast my shadows in a different direction, I will use my jeweler's loupe or a magnifying glass and my pen light. So really, for $50 to $75, you can have really solid equipment, really good equipment for starting your iridology adventure with. And I still have both of these at my desk. I choose which one I'm going to use just for little tweaks. I use the camera for photos, that if I want to look at something specifically before I load those photos into my computer, I will use one of my magnifying devices. These are perfectly good places to start. So I'm going to encourage you to go ahead, check out Walmart, check out Target, check out a stamp collecting shop. Those are the kind of stores that would have this kind of stuff. Also check out Amazon or any other online stores, because you'll find things like this there as well. If you were with me 2 weeks ago, you'll recall that I introduced you to some markers: lipemic diathesis, circulatory ring, meandering vessel, and porcelain vessel. Today we're going to do some case studies. We're going to do them next. And we're going to look at eyes. We're going to look at a little bit of the person's case history. We will look at what questions would I ask when I see certain markers. And then we'll talk about, and I'm really going to want you to play with me on this and feed into some ideas, what suggestions you would make based on the answers that the client gives us. First, I'm going to apologize. I know they say never apologize when you're teaching, but I really need to. These images were not taken with the camera I just showed you. These were done with an 8-megapixel camera. Now, for most of you, your smartphones are stronger than that, right? But when I bought that camera, it was state of the art. I needed to show you these pictures and talk about this case because we all have clients like this. And so I just needed to put one of these up. We'll talk about him. We'll talk about what his program was and what he did with it, just so you know that even when you are giving your best, your clients may not always be on board. Just before we do that, I'm going to give you a little quiz. So I need you to get your lightning fingers ready to type. What equipment do you need to start doing iridology? I feel like I should have some of that tick-tocky music, you know, like the Jeopardy music playing while you're writing down your answers. You know, and you would write your answers. What is a blah blah and a blah blah? Point form answers are great when you hit the send button. Oh, yes. Oh, Kinu, thank you for answering so quickly. And Flora, if you are still typing, go ahead and send it. I love all the answers. Lighted magnifying glass, lighted pen. Way to go, Kinu. Right on. Perfect. 100%. Well done. These eye photos are of a very gentle man. He is really a lovely person. Actually, he's one of my favorite clients. He's a male. He's in his mid-60s. He's about 20 pounds overweight. He smokes cigars socially, so 1 or 2 a week. He drinks alcohol daily, and he loves his coffee. He does not want to give that up. This fellow came to me the first time after hearing me speak at a Kiwanis meeting. Really what he mostly wanted was for me to validate that he was just fine, that everything he was doing was just fine. As I started looking in his eyes and gathering information, I knew I couldn't do that for him. I'm not one to lie to my clients, and I knew I could not tell him everything was just fine. The first thing I noticed as he walked into the room was that he has a biliary constitution. That means his eyes are neither blue nor are they pure brown. They're hazily. They've got some green in there, some orangey, browny. You know, they're kind of a mixture, but they're not true brown and they're not true blue. When we see that biliary constitution, we know that he is going to be prone to liver issues of some description. So the questions that we ask when we see biliary, and it doesn't matter what else they've come in for, we are always going to ask these biliary people, how is your liver function? How are your cholesterol and your triglycerides? Now, he wasn't really aware of what his liver does. He knew that his drinking was probably not good for it, but he wasn't aware of what his liver does. So I gave him some symptoms, and you sometimes have to do that because people may not know what their liver does or what their adrenal glands do, or what the pancreas does. They might know pancreas balances blood sugars and it doesn't work in diabetes, but they may not know all the other things. So you may have to kind of give them a little more information for them to tell you what you need to know. So I said, well, have you ever been jaundiced? Well, what's that? Well, jaundiced would mean that the whites of your eyes turned a little yellow. Oh, no, he'd never had that. Has he ever had itchy skin? No. Poor immune function? No. Does he get nauseous when he eats fats? No. So he wasn't aware of any liver issues, so that was good. He was also not aware of any cholesterol or triglyceride issues. So I asked him one step deeper. According to traditional Chinese medicine, the liver is where we store anger and bitterness. And so I asked him if he had a problem with anger. And I kind of knew what the answer was going to be, because I'd seen him interacting with his friends at the Kiwanis Club. These are men and women that he's worked with in the Kiwanis Club for probably 25 or 30 years. They're a tight group. And I was pretty sure there would be no anger. And he said, no, there really wasn't. So as I'm asking him these questions and he's giving me his answers, I'm making a little column on the piece of paper that I'm keeping with his records. And I'm writing down ideas of what I would like to suggest that he consider doing. And I haven't told him these yet. I'm just writing them down. So I'm thinking, I could tell him to add leafy greens. I could tell him to eliminate coffee. I could tell him to eliminate alcohol. But again, I'm not telling him these yet because I don't have all the information. I'm just writing the ideas down and thinking on paper. And then I noticed that he has a lot of these leaf petal shapes. This puts him into the category we call polyglandular subtype. And this can speak of things like adrenal insufficiency or pancreatic insufficiency. And because I already knew from meeting him at the Kiwanis Club that he drinks a fair amount, as do most of the gentlemen in that club, in that particular club, I doubt that it's true for every club, but it is true for this one club, I had to ask him if he craved sugars. Now, he didn't really crave sugars, so of course we had to expand that because it's not just sugars that can go out of balance if the pancreas is out of balance. We would think of it as breads and fruit and alcohol. And if he answered yes to any of those, we would be thinking about blood sugars. We know that if the blood sugars get elevated, it can create liver stress, and it can also elevate the triglycerides and even the cholesterol. So I wrote down some other ideas, not because he said, yeah, I crave sugar and yeah, I crave alcohol. I think because he drinks a couple of drinks a day and that's it. He doesn't typically get drunk. I don't think he's a full-blown alcoholic, but I think he's created a really bad habit for himself of feeling like he needs that glass of wine with dinner, that whatever it is, scotch and soda, or I don't even know. I don't drink, so I wouldn't know. In the evening, whatever. So in the list of ideas that I would want to talk to him about, I put down consume protein throughout the day. Right? That's one way to help stabilize blood sugars if we need to. Eliminate the refined carbohydrates in case he was eating white bread, white flour products, things made with white sugar. Get some exercise, and especially focus on getting the exercise after meals so that if his blood sugars are starting to go wonky, we can get them in check really quick. Now again, I haven't told him any of these suggestions yet because We've already written down 5 or 6 or 7 different things. That's way too much homework, way too much. Then other things caught my attention, and I wandered away from the iris, though I wasn't finished with the iris. So I came here and I saw this meandering vessel. Now, if you were with me a couple of weeks ago, we talked about meandering vessel. And as I saw this, it always suggests congested circulation. And the meandering vessel will always surface, will always become prominent before a symptom becomes prominent. If he's got symptoms that confirm this, then we know that the circulation has been congested for a very, very long time. So I asked him if he was aware of any circulatory issues. And he said he didn't really have any, but I pressed him a little bit, and he said his mother had died of a heart attack. So I wrote down on my list that I might want to consider using vitamin E, some oral chelation, maybe even some omega-3 with him as a way of supporting his circulatory system. And that's going to tie into another indicator we're going to see in a few minutes that is really important as well. Then I noticed also that he has a pinguecula developing, and it's here. It's a little bit hard to see, and a little bit here and a little bit here. When a pinguecula is just starting out, it typically will just have a different gloss to it. The surface of the eye will have a different gloss, and it might be a little bit discolored. Sometimes it's clear, but sometimes it's yellowish or even brownish. And these do develop over time. So the iris is predominantly genetic. The sclera is predominantly genetic. No, let me. The iris is predominantly genetic. The sclera is predominantly earned. So what we see in the sclera is more current. It's more active. It's more right now. It's more in this body for sure. So when we see a pinguecula, it almost always indicates, and our questions always go to, again, how's your liver? Because it strongly suggests an enzyme insufficiency in metabolizing fats properly. So he wasn't even aware that these were there, and I wasn't going to make a big fuss and focus on that right now, but it's adding to the things that I want to talk about with him, especially where the liver is related. And again, I put a check mark beside the leafy greens, the eliminate the coffee, and the eliminate alcohol, just underscoring that those would be really important things, because I've seen a couple of markers now pointing to the idea that his liver might not be the happiest of campers, both because of genetic things that he's inherited, but also because of things that we're seeing happening in his body right now. And then the pièce de résistance is that there is a lipemic diathesis. Now again, we covered this a couple of weeks ago in much more detail. It is this white, milky film that's at the top of the eye. This can have a bit of a genetic influence, but it also largely will be earned. This has to do again with the liver enzymes. And it says that the enzymes may be insufficient, again, for processing the carbs and the fats properly. And as such, we end up with fats of various kinds, not necessarily cholesterol, not necessarily triglycerides, but fats that are very sticky, circulating in the bloodstream. The cornea absorbs some of them, and that's what we're seeing right here. The cornea has absorbed some of them. And some of them, because they're sticky, may sediment in the arteries. So when I saw this, I knew right away then that we were looking at a marker that had both vascular implications and liver enzyme imbalance implications. So again, think back to your anatomy and physiology that you did to get whatever credentials you've got, and remember what the liver does in processing fats and carbs, and how the liver is responsible for making cholesterol and triglycerides. But if something's not going right, you're going to end up with fats that aren't the right type of fats, fats that are a little bit off balance, if you will, circulating in the bloodstream. And that's not going to be a good thing. So because I saw this lipemic diathesis, and I wondered if he might be blocking arteries, I decided to take his blood pressure. I always take the blood pressure 3 times, and I always give the average numbers. So I don't tell them what the numbers are until I've done all 3 readings, and I've done the math to add them all up and then divide them all and come out with that average number. So you will recognize that what I had to tell him was not the best news of the day. His blood pressure came back as 145/90. Now, he said he'd never had high blood pressure before in his life, but then he also said that his blood pressure hadn't been measured in at least 5 years. Well, I'm not a doctor. I can't diagnose and I can't prescribe. And because this is a medically diagnosable condition, I legally had to tell him, you have to go see your doctor. I can work with you with herbs and with diet and with lifestyle, but I legally have to tell you to see your doctor. He was adamant that he didn't want to do that. He knew she would give him medications, and he really didn't want that. So we talked about what some of his options were. And I asked him what would he be willing to do to avoid going on meds. You really want to be careful when you hear this answer, because I've heard this answer from a lot of people, and 80 to 90% of them can't do it. He said he would do anything and everything I instructed him to do if it would fix his blood pressure and keep him off meds. So we talked about what that meant. We talked about how his current diet and his sedentary lifestyle were not helping matters at all, that there was going to have to be some radical work. And because I truly knew that he wasn't going to do the homework, I did snowball him. I gave him much more information than I normally would, but I was also very concerned. With blood pressure of 145/90 that he hadn't had measured in 5 years, it told me he probably hadn't had his cholesterol checked in 5 years. It told me with this that he was at risk for creating blood clots and throwing a clot to have a stroke or a heart attack. And I needed to do something that might get his attention, make him wake up and realize that he has control of this. So I talked about how he needed to reduce his drinking to 2 drinks a week, not 2 drinks a day, 2 drinks a week. That he really needed to get rid of the coffee because it's so hard on the liver, and that messes up the liver's ability to process the fats and carbs properly. He needed to increase his leafy greens rather, and he needed to get protein spread out through the day consistently to keep his blood sugars really, really stable, and that half of his proteins should probably be vegan. I also said that he really should be getting up for 3 20-minute walks a day, preferably a walk after each meal. Now again, I usually don't tell a client even half that much in one appointment, but you know, his eyes and what I'm seeing there is not giving me a happily ever after kind of story, and I needed to get in there. But as I started going after these things and teaching him about the importance, the pushback started. Oh, all my socializing is around alcohol. Every time I get together with the guys, and I'm with one of the guys at least every day, we drink. He wasn't about to switch because he didn't want to get teased. He didn't want to stop the coffee. He likes his coffee. Why should he have to give up something he likes? He couldn't possibly walk 3 times a day for 20 minutes at a stretch because, well, he's semi-retired and his schedule is just too unpredictable. And I'm getting all this pushback. So I just said, well, you've got the information. You're the only one who can make the changes. And I really do think you should go see your doctor. Again, he didn't want to do that, but he eventually did. The next time he came to see me, he had increased the leafy greens slightly. Now, by slightly, I mean, oh my goodness, not enough to make any difference. He was on the meds that the doctor had prescribed for blood pressure. They were working very well, but he was determined he was not going to stay on them. 2 months later, he was still on the meds. He had become comfortable with the thought that the meds were controlling everything and he didn't need to change anything. And that's just how it sometimes goes. I was very sad, but I understood that that's just where he was going to be. Case study number 2, female age 53. She's at an excellent body weight. She's fairly active. She cross-country skis and snowshoes and hikes and rides her bike in the mountains and things like that. So she's pretty active. Her father died of a heart attack, and she also was investigated for this. They suspected she'd had a heart attack about a year before these pictures were taken. Now, I don't know about you, but I think 52 is a little young to be having a heart attack. You'll notice that she is the biliary constitution again. Her eyes are not blue. They are not brown. Kind of orangey, hazily, very pretty, and that puts her into the biliary type. Now again, she's a naturopath, so we had a lot of fun because I can ask questions at a deeper level. She gets the language, she knows what I'm talking about, and we can kind of get to the meaty stuff here. So I asked her how her liver function was, and she said it was fine. I asked her how her cholesterol and triglycerides are, and she said she thought they were okay. Now, what I want to know from you is, if you suspect somebody's liver is a little off, what kind of questions do you ask them? What kind of questions do you ask when you're suspecting liver is out of balance? Again, we've got the Jeopardy music playing here while you're writing down what is. And of course I'm teaching you, don't write down what is. What questions do you ask? And it's okay if they're questions we've already talked about. I'm just curious to know what you ask, how you practice. And just waiting for someone to hit that send button. We've become so impatient with the internet, haven't we? If anything takes more than the blink of an eye, we're thinking our internet is slow. Funny, because I remember the days of dial-up internet, back when it had no pictures on it, when it was all just text. Okay. If you're typing a question, raise your hand so I know to wait for you. All right, we've got a question being written, so great. We'll just wait for it. And I'm sure it won't be too much longer. You know, so as while we're waiting, we'll just chat a little bit. So as I was asking this naturopath about her liver function and her cholesterol and triglycerides, I felt like I could actually say to her, well, how many leafy greens do you eat in a day? How much? And could you eat more? And that 2 cups of coffee, you know that's not good for your liver. What can you do to get rid of it? What else can you put in that cup that would be better for you? Right? And she doesn't drink alcohol, so we didn't even need to have that conversation. And it was good that way. You know, so you have to gauge where your client's at when you are teaching them, right? And I know you already know that. While we're waiting for that question to come in, it seems to be taking its time in cyberspace. There it goes. Yay! Oh, I like where this one's going. This is a great question. Oh, okay, perfect. Excellent. Well done. Very thorough. If they've gotten their cholesterol or triglycerides tested, right, you want to know that. How is their digestion? Yeah. What's their diet like? How much alcohol is consumed? What is the color of their feces? If it's pale, you know they are not doing the bile thing properly. Well done. Well done indeed. Yahoo. That was good. Well done. Okay. So then we continued on to lipemic diathesis. We talked about this a little bit with the previous assessment as well. And again, the questions are, how is the liver function? How is the cholesterol and triglycerides? And we want to talk about adding the leafy greens, eliminating coffee and alcohol if those are issues. But, you know, here we go. The cholesterol and triglyceride things are interesting because how many people do you know that have had a stroke or a heart attack, and yet their cholesterol, their triglycerides, and their blood pressure are all perfectly normal? Right? Those are only 3 risk factors out of a list of about 200. And so they don't always suggest an increased risk, but when we see the lipemic diathesis in someone who personally has probably had a heart attack and who has a parent who's had a heart attack, we're going to sit up and pay attention regardless of what the cholesterol, triglycerides, and blood pressure are doing. We are probably going to want to jump in there with some preventive measures. Now, especially for this client, because as a female, her risk of having another heart attack in 5 years is 35%. If she were a male, that would be down around the 18% mark. I don't know why women have the higher risk. It might be a hormonal thing. But knowing that means that we need to focus on keeping her vascular system really, really healthy. This client also has a circulatory ring. This purplish, sometimes it looks bluish depending on your computer screen, haze that's hanging off the side of the eye, that's the circulatory ring. It means pretty much the same thing as when someone's lips and fingernails are turning blue. It means that the blood is not circulating the nutrients and the oxygen to all of the tissues in the body as well as it should. So that's interesting, but when we put that on top of the fact that this client is also what we call anxiety tetanic, we know we really want to sit up and pay attention. Now, what the heck is anxiety tetanic? When we have anxiety tetanic, we have these rings that come around, and we have these lines that radiate outward. What this all together spells with the rings that go around and the lines that radiate outward is this client spends most of her physical time functioning in the sympathetic nervous system. Can we understand that the sympathetic nervous system puts a lot of stress on the cardiovascular system, right? We know that the parasympathetic is called rest and digest. What are the words that we use to describe the sympathetic nervous system? There's 2 words we used for a long time, and a 3rd one was just added in the last 10 or 15 years. I want you to type that in. How do we describe what the sympathetic nervous system does to how we respond to stress? Ooh, yeah, that was fast. Fight or flight. And what is the 3rd word? Do you know what the 3rd word is? Think of a deer in the headlights, right? They often don't fight, they often don't flee, but they freeze. That is the 3rd response. Yeah, good job, you got it. You got that one, good job. And so we are talking here about someone who spends all of her time slightly on edge. She doesn't look like it, she doesn't act like it, but her body is always slightly on edge, waiting for that next catastrophe to happen. So that's putting a stress on the adrenal glands. It's putting a stress on the circulatory system because the sympathetic system cuts off circulation to the edges of the body, right? That's what we're seeing here. This is inherited. It's genetic, but it can be intensified or reduced through lifestyle. So the things that I talked about with this client was get rid of the caffeine. Those adrenals do not need caffeine in any way, shape, or form. Add some magnesium and some B vitamins and balance out the proteins through the day. Really, really important to keep those blood sugars very balanced because that takes some stress off the sympathetic system, and this is all just building together. Now again, I could give her lots of things because she already knew this. She really just wanted someone to give her a little teeny kick in the behind and say, come on, you know you need to do this. Oh yeah, I should get back on track with that. Right, most of us know way more than we do. And most of us need somebody else to hold us responsible for what we're doing, right? And that's all she really needed from me. One of the things that I really stressed with her was that I thought it was a great idea that she stopped in the day to have a warm mug of something. And we just talked about different ideas of things that she could put in that mug that would be warm and relaxing rather than coffee, because the coffee was certainly not helping her. Now you'll notice in this eye she has a very large meander. Very large. Now she knows her body very well because she's a naturopath. She understands the feelings and the symptoms and things like that. But when I asked her about circulatory congestion, she really wasn't aware of any except for having probably had a heart attack. So I asked her then if she had varicose veins. Because, of course, varicose veins show us there is congestion in the circulatory system. And she said that, yes, she had some varicose veins that had been starting up. Again, this looks like they've been building for quite a while. Blood vessels don't typically go from thin and faint to heavy like this really fast. They build. So this is where, as an iridologist, you want to be monitoring your client's eyes probably every 6 months. If you're using handheld equipment, you want to have a little diagram of eyes just so you can do some quick sketches of what you see, particularly in the sclera, so that you can monitor changes. If you do have a camera and do photos, you can monitor things a little more easily. So very, very important. So she said that she had the very beginnings of some varicose veins. So if that's the symptom she's starting to see, the problem has been brewing for a lot longer than that. Again, she's so well versed in her healing modalities that when I suggested vitamin E and oral chelation, she was totally on board with doing things like that. Supra or omega-3 is another great thing here. Some CoQ10 to help protect her heart since she has had a heart attack. So I was able to lob a lot of things out for her to distill quite easily. If she didn't have that background, if she was coming in with no really strong background in natural healing at all, I would have started, the first thing I would have done would have been get rid of the coffee, take a month and gradually wean off the coffee and increase the leafy greens. And I would have added vitamin E and omega-3. That would have been my starting point. Super, super manageable, not difficult at all. So have you caught a glimpse of, as we've done this, of how when you understand the iris and sclera, you can integrate your nutrition knowledge? You can integrate your herbal knowledge. You can integrate your lifestyle knowledge. You can prioritize which pieces of education and homework to share with your clients today, next session, and the session after that. And I will literally make a list in the client's file that says, and I have a little chart that I fill in where it says, lists the different iris signs and the different things that I want to work on with them, the different things I want to teach them, and I list them in the order that I want to teach them in so they make sense. And I always start with the one where they're going to feel the most response. So if I suggest, for example, if I've got a client who comes in with arthritis and they're drinking 2 cups of coffee a day, I know that if they will quit drinking the coffee and replace it with something else, that we can reduce their pain by 50 to 75% within a week to 10 days. I've seen it so many times. And so that's the client that I'm not going to worry too much about the carbohydrates and the sugars and the white flour. I'm not going to worry about whether they eat all their leafy greens. I'm going to focus on the coffee. That's going to be a hard one. They're going to push back. I'm going to hold firm, but be gentle, and explain why this is so important. And I'm going to invite them to do it as an experiment. Because when I say to someone, quit coffee for the rest of your life, that's a really long time. And if they really love their coffee, they don't want to get on that train. So I'll say to them, let's have you cut the coffee out completely for 2 weeks, see how you feel, and then I want you to go back to drinking your 2 cups of coffee a day after that. So 2 weeks, no cheating, then go back. And then you tell me how it went. Typically, by about the 4th or 5th day of being off the coffee, I'm getting an email or a phone call saying, I don't believe it, but you know, that hip that was so sore, I can actually walk 10 blocks now without any pain. And then when I see them for their next appointment, I'm going, so how'd it go when you went back on the coffee? And they look at me like, are you crazy? Why would I do that? And so if we approach them from that gentle perspective of test it, see where it takes you, then you decide where you want to be, 9 times out of 10, they will capitulate and do it the right way. When you understand all the iris and sclera stuff, you can also create the bite-sized doable pieces of homework for your clients right in your client sessions. Yeah, go us, right? That's exactly what we want to have. And it will help you to get rid of those intake forms. Just do your waiver release form. That's all you need. It'll help you to know exactly which problems to address first and what the best recommendations are. It'll significantly reduce doing research, and it'll eliminate your program design time outside of your client time. You'll stop overwhelming your clients with too much information while you're encouraging them to become long-term repeat clients. Don't you think that if you help someone reduce their arthritis pain by 50 or 75% in the first 10 days to 2 weeks, that they're going to want to come back to you? Because now that they are pain-free or significantly pain-reduced, now they're aware that they get headaches coming from shoulder tension. Or now they're aware that, oh, they've got some acid reflux happening. Or, do you see, now that they've gotten rid of this major symptom, they can see the other symptoms that they've got that they had pushed aside. And, well, if you helped with that arthritis pain, maybe you could help me with my reflux. Maybe you could help me with this chronic sinus issue, right? They're going to become long-term repeat customers. And that's what you want. You want them to be, you want to have clients coming back to you 6 times a year. And then once you've got them totally settled, maybe twice a year after that for touch bases, just to make sure things stay on track. I've got clients that have been coming to see me now for 30 years. Some of them were, I saw the first place I lived with my husband after we got married, kind of thing, right? And so you take care of their needs in the right way. They will keep coming back. They will be loyal. That's what we're looking for. Let's do another case. Now, the first 2 cases we looked at were biliary. We needed to throw in one that's not biliary, because you need to see that not just biliary people have circulatory risk factors. These are lymphatic eyes. Lymphatic means predominantly blue. But we could easily see circulatory indicators in a brown eye. We would call that a hematogenic eye as well. This is a female, age 58. She's at a good body weight, and she has a pretty darn good diet. She strives to maintain that good diet, but she has been known to enjoy sweet treats a little more often than she probably should. Yeah, that's all she wants to tell anybody, right? She does indulge a little bit, often late in the evening after having put in a very long day. She feels like she doesn't drink, she doesn't smoke, she doesn't do any of that stuff. She just wants a little something sweet as a reward for having worked so hard. Now, her circulatory signs are a little bit different, and they carry a little bit of a different weight because we're going to look at her family history as well. First thing that struck me about her eyes was that she has all of these dark orange, light brown, dirty orange, patchy, speckly things in her eyes. We call them pigments. When we see that kind of brown, dirty orange stuff, we always have to ask, how's your liver? That's an indication that the liver is out of balance. These pigments can either be inherited or they can be earned, either or. So I asked her, how's your liver? She knew the answer right off the bat. She said, yeah, I've got a problem. I have Gilbert's syndrome. Now, how many of you know what Gilbert's syndrome is? It's spelled Gilbert's, but it's a French word, so it's Gilbert. Have you ever heard of Gilbert? Okay, it's one that you might actually want to do a little bit of research on just to know about it. Gilbert's syndrome is an enzyme deficiency that impairs the body's ability to conjugate bilirubin. All right, so bilirubin, where does that come from? Bilirubin comes from the breakdown of red blood cells. So you may have seen little babies, brand new little babies, who by day 3 or 4, they look like they've just gotten back from a week in Hawaii. They're so tan, but their eyeballs are yellowish. They are jaundiced. And that's because they've had so many red blood cells in utero. They don't need those now that they're out of the uterus and they're actually breathing on their own. And the body starts to break down the excess. But in the breaking down, too much bilirubin is released and the liver can't keep up with it, so these babies become jaundiced. With Gilbert's syndrome, these people, it doesn't matter how old they are, they just never conjugate their bilirubin properly. So when blood cells are being recycled, they can end up with more jaundice. It's a benign problem. It doesn't create any other issues, except for sometimes a bit of abdominal pain. It gets worse if they fast. It gets worse if they get overtired, and it gets worse if they don't get out in the sunshine periodically, because natural sunshine helps to conjugate the bilirubin. All right, so she knew that already, but you know, when I hear that the liver has one genetic issue, I always suspect there's going to be at least one more. Okay, there's going to be something else. So we just kind of tuck that in our notes and pay attention to it. So I suggested, and again, she was pretty well versed. I wrote these down first, leafy greens and restrict the sweets, but we were going to go suggesting that anyways to her because that's what she's going to need. And we know she's going to do it because her history is pretty depressively impressive. She also has lipemic diathesis. Now, the cases we've seen before have been very prominent. When you look at this eye, you can see just the very, very faint beginning of a little bit of white clouding right up here. And over here as well, just a tiny bit. And it's not this. This is light reflection. So it's back in here. It's looking just a little bit like there's a bit of a fog over the eye. That is the beginning of lipemic diathesis. Again, this is an acquired sign coming primarily from the liver not dealing with fats properly. So I had to ask her again, how's your liver function? How's your cholesterol? How's your triglycerides? Well, her cholesterol has always been low normal, to the point where one doctor actually told her, you will never have a heart attack. Well, I would hold that doctor's feet to the fire if I were her. And her blood pressure also tends to be the low normal range, sort of 110 over 55-ish. So there's not really any issues there at this point in time. But again, when I'm talking about liver, I'm always going to consider the leafy greens because the leafy greens are your liver food. And I'm going to suggest a ridiculous amount of them. If you've seen the leafy green salads that you buy in the plastic boxes, and they are 5-ounce boxes, that ideally is a one-day serving. I know you're going, oh my goodness, who can eat that much? Not very many people. So we start with, can you start with one dinner plate stacked 3 to 4 inches tall of leafy greens, and that's our starting point. And if my clients can get that down, they get a huge pat on the back, and we gradually then build to, could you have half that much again at lunchtime? Change the dressing from one to the other. You know, do what you need to. Put nuts in one salad and put chopped up peppers and celery in the other salad. Do things to make it different so that it's a little more interesting, right? Because for a lot of us, if our food's boring, we're not going to keep up with it. She also has a mild circulatory ring. See that blue haze hanging off the top of her eye and a little bit up here? So I had to ask her, how are her blood sugars? Does she have cold hands and cold feet? And she said, well, you know, I think the blood sugars is why I'm wanting that little sweet treat every evening. And yeah, my hands and feet are usually frosty, icy cold. Interesting. Interesting. So again, that circulatory ring is inherited, but she can make it worse or she can make it better. And this is actually not bad. We've seen some worse already today in our times together still, right? And we have a question here. If they can't do organic leafy greens, sorry, just let me read this again. If they can't do organic leafy greens, still the same amount, yeah. You know, the world isn't quite perfect yet, and not everyone can afford to go organic. I understand that the not organic has some risks involved, but not everyone can afford, I don't know what organics are priced like where you live, but where I live, organics tend to run twice the price of regular. And here those little boxes of salads run about $5 a box for the non-organic ones. And so by the time you make that organic, that's a pretty hard hit. So we do the best we can. We start where we can and we build from there. And maybe we suggest, could you do organics once a day? Maybe you do your organic salad on Sunday, and the rest of the week just do regular. Right? The world isn't perfect, and we're not expecting perfection. We're expecting good effort. So again, with everything that this client does, she's actually doing things that are helping to reduce the risks that we're going to talk about in a moment. And we're going to talk about some of them in just a second because, you know, then I noticed she's got meandering vessels starting to build, and quite a lot of blood vessels in here. Now, some of these could be just irritation from having her pictures taken. Right, the blood vessels in the eye really are responsive to stress, and you know that if you've cried and your eyes have ended up bloodshot, right? They respond very quickly. They calm down just about as quickly. So when I saw these, I asked the question, what about varicose veins? Because she's not had any obvious problems, except, as she said, yeah, I've got varicose veins. I've got really bad varicose veins. I've got big, fat, ugly varicose veins. Now, that's a big issue. She's only 58, but varicose veins increases the risk of forming a blood clot and of that blood clot breaking off and getting thrown to create a stroke or a heart attack. In spite of the fact that she works out 5 to 7 hours a week, she does have a really decent diet. She gets adequate rest. As in, she really pushes to get 8 to 9 hours horizontal in bed, sleeping every night, so she can feel great the next day. Her history, her family history, is not great. Her father has had 2 heart attacks and is now in heart failure. Going back to his father, had 2 heart attacks and the second one killed him. Going back one more generation, that father, both of his parents died with heart disease, and the mother-in-law on that generation also died of heart disease. So coming down through her father's line, we've got 3 generations of really yucky cardio history. So that is why this woman is so focused on doing so much that's right. She does not want to end up being like her father or her grandfather. She wants better health. So she is very motivated. Oops, sorry. There we go. She, again, she doesn't smoke, she doesn't drink coffee, she doesn't drink tea. She strives to get 5 to 8 servings of fruits and veggies every day, with the focus being on the leafy veggies, to the point where it's a joke in her family. They make a big salad, and she says to everybody else, pass the bowl around and whatever's left is mine. And everyone takes their little tiny pile that would fit in a fruit dish, right, in a dessert dish. And when it comes back to her, there is enough to at least pile her dinner plate 4 inches high. So she has 2 plates. She has a dinner plate for her salad and a side plate for everything else. It's really funny. She sent me pictures of it. She does vitamin E regularly. She does oral chelation regularly. She uses omega-3 regularly, and she uses CoQ10 regularly. So she is really being preventive. And when she looked at her eye pictures and saw all of these things that were surfacing, she got even more serious about getting down with getting this stuff in order. So far, you've had a tiny taste of what iridology and sclerology is all about. And there's more to come. And that is actually coming up. We've got more today, a little bit more to cover today, but we also have a class starting soon. Confident Nutritionist Dynamic Iridology starts on January 17th. And the early registration is going to open 2 weeks from today during my next free webinar. And here is what you will learn. You're going to learn more like what you've been learning today, how to create the programs in your own sessions, only we do a lot more talking about that in the course. Get rid of that unpaid homework time. How to do the base assessment in 5 minutes or less without the lengthy intake paperwork. How to ask questions that are relevant to your clients. I'm going to give you a little inside scoop on that today. How to prioritize the problems your client needs help with. So every client comes in with what I call the shopping list. They come in with that list of problems they want your help with. And I love it when they do that, and I encourage them to write that list down and bring it in with them. And then I give them note paper to take notes as well if they haven't brought a notebook with them. And when I look at what their symptoms are, what they want help with, and I look at their eyes, my job is then to see how much of what I see in their eyes correlates with what they're feeling, with what their symptoms are, and how can I relate what I see in their eyes and the homework I want to give them to what their number 1 and or number 2 issues are, so that they know I have heard them, and I'm taking their shopping list seriously, but they also know that I am digging deep and pulling out all of my resources to make sure we do this right the first time. When you know all of this, you know how to connect what you know about nutrition and or herbology and what you discover using dynamic iridology. You will know how to do a deeper assessment for more direction and understanding of your client's needs when that is needed. Specifically, what you're going to learn in the class is beginning to intermediate iridology and sclerology at a level that will prepare you to take the International Iridology Practitioners Association certification exam if you choose to. That is administered by IPA, and they charge an exam fee for that has nothing to do with me. I will prepare you, and if you want to do the exam, you may, and if you don't, I have lots of students who don't want the certification, and that's just fine. It doesn't bother me in the least. They've got the information. If they choose to do the exam later on, they certainly can. We touch on basic nutrition and basic herbology the way we have today. So I don't teach nutrition, I don't teach herbology, I teach you how to integrate them with your iridology, and that's important to understand. So let's take a quick look at this eye, and I'm going to do that really super fast analysis that I promised you. You can do the base analysis in less than 5 minutes. This is a lymphatic eye. That means this person is prone to elevated acid in their tissue. When I see, and that elevated acid can show up as things like asthma, allergies, arthritis, skin conditions, kidney disorders. So that's my short list to work with. Then I see all these petal shapes coming around here. And that tells me that they are prone to some kind of endocrine imbalance. Most likely that's going to be adrenal or blood sugar. And it also tells me they're very creative, and that in order for them to be really happy, they need to be expressing that creativity, and however that comes out for them. I'm looking and seeing that they don't digest proteins particularly well. They don't have the acid available in the stomach to do that, and it's a genetic thing. And I'm seeing that at the stomach level, their digestion is also not great. They probably don't secrete digestive juices in general very well. I see in here that we are likely going to have some skin problems surfacing because the skin does not want to do its job very well. We have a bit of a circulatory ring, so I want to be wondering about circulation as well. And when we're seeing this, I know I'm going to be wondering where we've got double lines coming around here in some places. I'm going to be asking about bowel health. I'm also seeing a few lines going crisscrossy down here, these little ones down here. So we're going to look at bone health. I'm going to look at connective tissues, at congested circulation. I'm going to wonder if there was some kind of an infection, a localized infection that's been resolved. That's your base analysis. When you understand those things, your mind is going tick, 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 and you're going, okay, well, with all of this, the single most important thing is a few bits of diet correction, and I'm going to go straight for that stomach lining. Because if I fix the stomach lining, I can help the digestion, I can reduce the acids, I can take the stress off the kidneys, right? And I can just keep going with things. Now, these eyes belong to a 20-year-old who has multiple food issues and menstrual pain, right? And so the acid levels will do all of that. That stomach, what we're seeing in the nutritive zone here, will do all of that to her. We see that over here, this is also triggering questions about bronchioles, throat, thyroid, right? And so, I mean, how many key issues did I hit right there? I would never cover all of that in one session. Never, especially not in the first session. But I can pick the key starting points, and I can be working with that and give her homework that is meaningful, that's going to help her get somewhere in that first 2 or 3 or 4 weeks before I see her the second time. So again, Confident Nutritionist Dynamic Iridology registration is opening in 2 weeks. I just wanted to share what some students have said, and we still have more iridology stuff to cover, so I hope you'll stay with me here for the next 13 minutes. We will be done at 7:30. Allison Taylor said Judith's teaching is professional and easy to learn as she stops for questions, has great slides, and reviews every week. Her students are her priority, and their understanding of the information is imperative to her. There is a student website page with all the PDFs for downloading and videos to watch. The page is easily accessible. It is a one-of-a-kind course that is so challenging of your skills and exciting to see what's next every week. There's also a private Facebook page for questions, comments, assessments, and just keeping in touch between weeks. I would definitely recommend this course to anyone who's even thinking of taking an iridology course. Judith is a wealth of knowledge and a fantastic mentor. I love this course, and I know you will too. Allison was completing her training as a certified natural health practitioner, and one of the prerequisites was they had to have an iridology component. The school she was studying at had arranged to bring an iridology instructor in, but not enough students were able to take the course when that instructor wanted to come, so the instructor canceled. Allison came to me. The other students went to do a correspondence iridology course, and when they would meet up for their other classes, Allison would tell them what she had learned, and they were so jealous. I wish I had someone to explain that to me. We aren't even covering that in our class. You know, so she was really pleased, and I was very pleased that she was pleased. Karen Choate came to me also as a CNHP with a natural digestive specialist on this. Having recently completed the Confident Nutritionist program with Judith Cobb, I can honestly say this is one of the most rewarding, informational, and fun classes I've ever had. Judith is a born teacher, meaning she is extremely patient and kind. She keeps things light with a bit of humor, but above all, she is a master at her craft and generously shares her knowledge. Judith is committed to the success of her students. I feel very blessed and fortunate to have had such an amazing teacher and to have been a part of her class. I have already implemented several techniques and applied extremely crucial and beneficial knowledge and skills that I learned in this class to my own practice with great success. Thanks to Judith, I am definitely a much more confident nutritionist. Now that was lovely, but a couple weeks later she sent me this. Thank you, Judith. It's been a pleasure studying under you and learning from you. I really miss our classes. I hear that a lot. But I'm looking forward to completing this component of iridology and continuing my education, most hopefully with you. I have become much more comfortable with taking photos of my patients' eyes, and I have begun to implement this incredible work in my practice quite successfully. It truly has helped immensely in my decisions and assessments. Thank you for sharing your skill, your knowledge, and your patience. So what's actually included in the course? 20 sessions, live webinars. It's about 40 hours long. Now, if the classes are really full, and by really full I mean I max out at 10 students per class. If we have 10 students in a class, we may have to add an extra session or two, just because as we're discussing things and learning new things and discussing cases and whatnot, sometimes we don't get through everything I think we should in that session, and it has to carry over to the next class session. And I have no problems adding a couple of extra sessions to make sure we cover everything and cover it well. You know, if we only have 4 or 5 in a class, we can do it in 20 sessions quite easily. Each class is recorded in its entirety and posted on the student website, so you can review it as often as you want. The content is edited also into short topic videos, so if you miss a class, you can listen to the whole class. If you just need help with certain topics, you can go just to that topic and just review it. The content is all stored on your student site for 18 months, and then at the end of 18 months, when you have finished all your work, you are migrated over to my alumni site. Okay, because I can't have a million different websites out there circulating, right? I like to keep my internet space pretty clean. So after 18 months, you get migrated to the alumni site that has all the content on it. So if you need to go back and review, you can. Digital textbook where you get weekly installments. I really insist that my students not work ahead. That's why I'm kind of picky and I don't give them the whole textbook right out of the starting blocks. Iridology is foundational. If you don't get the basics, you're not going to get the rest of it. So I don't let my students work ahead. Each class starts with a review of the previous week, and each week has lots of in-class practice and interaction. You attend 80% of the classes, you get a certificate of attendance. Most places will honor this as 40 hours of CEU. So if you need CEUs for other credentials, you may be able to use this class for that. And that's kind of cool. And so, you know, it doesn't matter what color the eyes are. You can always find something in those eyes to teach your clients about. So in an eye like this, you might think, oh, there's a lot of different marks in there. We've got squiggles. We've got vessels that are getting fat. We've got a vessel that's hugging the edge of the iris almost all the way around. We've got lots of petal shapes that are pretty dark, some of them. We've got different colors. Look at this flame orange here. We've got these brown pigments. We've got so many different things, different textures within some of these petal shapes. Where do you begin? Well, the fact of the matter is that, again, as you're gathering the history and as you're noticing all of these things, you will learn in the course of the class and in the course of your practice how to distill it down to where do you start. And there's always somewhere to start. Often the symptoms that are suggested again by the sclera won't even be manifesting as symptoms in the body yet. So this means if you can come here, for example, and address this, you may be averting a kidney issue that is trying to brew, right? So this is all about learning it and distilling things down. Oh, and disregard this URL. I just noticed it's up there. That's to register for today's webinar. Bad. I did not change that. Okay, so disregard that one completely. Even in a true brown eye, we haven't looked at any brown eyes. They can be a little harder to read, but not all that much, because brown eyes are just like any other color. You're either going to see different markings. You could see a lipemic diathesis. Actually, we've got a bit of a lipemic diathesis here. Right? You can see the lines that go around. We talked about those, the lines that radiate out. You can always see the sclera. So there's always something that you can see even in a dark brown eye. Now with the class that's coming up that's starting in January, there's bonuses worth about $2,600. Now, I feel really strongly about this, the IPA student membership. That is my gift to you. And I mention this in US dollars because everything else we talk about is going to be Canadian dollars. Can I just have a show of hands? How many of you are in Canada? In Canada. Okay, great. So you understand Canadian dollars. Those of you who may not understand that the Canadian dollar and the US dollar are never worth the same amount. That rare brief moment that it might happen is so fleeting. Right now, the US dollar is worth 100 cents and the Canadian dollar is worth 70 cents. So why do we still call it a dollar? Who knows? And so the IPA student membership is in US dollars. And that's my gift to you. I send you the paperwork, you fill it in, and I send in the money. We do that towards the end of your course. You also have the bonus of the Iridology cheat sheet. Remember in this tonight we talked about looking at a marking, recognizing it, knowing what questions to ask, and then knowing what to recommend. That's what the cheat sheets are. They go through every iris marker, and this cheat sheet is pages long. Like, it's a book in and of itself. It's a book. I'm just re-editing it to make sure it's absolutely crystal clear, so I don't know exactly how many pages, but I want to say it's about 50 to 70 pages, 8.5 by 11. Okay, so it's a book. It goes through every eye sign you learn, how to recognize it, no pictures, just an explanation, because you should know what it looks like by the time I'm done with you. The questions to ask, the supplements, the herbs and vitamins you could recommend, the dietary recommendations and lifestyle recommendations, if there are any, all in that little cheat sheet. It's probably worth more than $249 because it's the whole class condensed. Private Facebook group for confident nutritionist students and alumni for us to talk about iridology, to share cases we're working on, to just support each other and have a community. We have a monthly student-driven coaching webinar. And this gets recorded. So if you're working on a case and can send photos to me or can write out a description, I put that up on slides. We do a webinar, and then we talk about it. We talk about it. We walk through how would you do an analysis? What are the important questions here? And you share with us the case of it, the female age 58, blah, 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 so that we have the context for what we're looking at. It's a great learning activity. The IPA exam, which again is optional, I schedule a couple of times a year here where I will supervise the exam. You can do it locally too. You don't need to use me, but if you want to come to Calgary, you are welcome to. The day before the exam, we do a live practice. We practice on people. I bring people in. You look at real eyes. We do an analysis of them. We talk about them. We make sure you're on the right track. We answer any last-minute questions you have before you sit for the exam. If you are not one of my students, you get to pay $299 for it. If you are my student, you get it for free. The first part of your IPA exam is that you need to do 10 iris analysis cases. And so I provide you with slides and case histories, and you do them and you send them to me to grade. It takes me about 5 hours to grade them. That's worth nearly $800 of my time. And then you and I meet online for a 1-hour private tutorial, just you and me, where we go over these analyses and we make sure that you've got it all straight. If there's anything that I've seen that's been consistently off, we correct you. Everything you're doing right, I'm going, way to go. That's it. You've got it. Awesome work. And then IPA requires a full case study to be done. So they provide that to me. I provide that to you. When that's done, you send it to me to mark. It takes me about an hour to mark that. And then you and I meet for another 1-hour private tutorial to review that one case study. And again, make sure you're solid. When that's done, I let IPA know that you are ready for your final written exam and that all you need to do is send down your exam application and your fee and your proctoring form, and they will help you get your exam done. Why would you want to study with me? Well, because I've been where you are. I understand the financial and time constraints of running a business, taking care of a family, home, friends, and other important commitments. Life is busy. Most of us can't justify spending 5 or 6 days solid going to a webinar, going to a workshop to learn something. And I will tell you, if you think you want to learn iridology that way, I think you're a little bit crazy. because by the end of the second day, or even by noon on the second day, your head will be swimming and you won't be absorbing much. Where we teach it 2 hours a week, you learn something, you go and you practice it. Then you come back, you ask more questions, I teach you more things, you go and you practice that. So by the end of our time, you are solid. I understand learning needs, and we all don't learn in the same way. So I've got written materials, we have the recordings, we have the live webinars. I understand there's a lot to learn about iridology and sclerology, and it can be overwhelming. And so I've got a lot of different ways in place to support your learning. It's less expensive to study with a Canadian teacher that charges in Canadian dollars. And if you're Canadian, you're going woohoo for that, right? Because you really don't want to pay 30% more. And if you're American, you're going woohoo too, because you're paying 30% less. Why should you consider the IPA certification? Because it will affiliate you with a professional, internationally recognized group. You'll have opportunities to keep up to date on the latest research, and they do webinars in the summer, they do webinars throughout the year. They also do a symposium, a face-to-face symposium. It's coming up in February in Las Vegas, where you can go and study and learn and rub shoulders. It also adds your energy to the movement to have iridology recognized by healthcare systems worldwide. And it demonstrates to your clients that you've been properly trained in the most current, valid, and accurate iridology assessment techniques. Iridology research has marched on. What we know now is so different from what I learned 35 years ago. Night and day different. So if you are still using old material, or if you are still studying with someone who graduated 35 years ago and has not kept up to speed, you're studying old stuff that's no longer accurate. The IPA certification exam is $175 US. Sorry, I can't do anything about that, and it's payable to IPA, not to me, but only when you're ready to take your exam. So you don't even have to worry about this until we get to that point with you. The benefits of what you will learn. Now, we are almost done here. No more homework time for you. Woohoo! You'll be able to create those therapeutic sequences to help your clients be more successful and keep them coming back to continue their wellness journey. Yeah. You'll be able to eliminate lengthy intake questionnaires, and you will be able to develop rapport in minutes, and you'll be more precise in your client work. Yeah. You know, people think, well, if I'm more precise, then I'll see my clients less often, and it doesn't work that way. The more you help your clients precisely with what their problems really are, the more impressed they are, and the more they want to stay in touch with you and come back in for tune-ups. Right? They don't want someone who's dithering around. That's just the way it is. Right? They want it done right the first time. All right, so I hope you will join me on the 29th. This link is correct. Make a note of it. Get in there and get registered to join me on the 29th. Again, we've got 10:30 a.m. or 6 p.m. You've got that drop-down menu on that form. And join me for the bone and skin markers. So if you want to see what it looks like to see the risk of osteoporosis in the eyes, for instance, you'll want to join me for that one. And of course, that day we will be launching registration for the class that starts January 17th. And I'll just let you in on this as well, but that class will also have a choice of 2 times. You'll have a choice of 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Calgary, Alberta time, or 6 p.m. to 8 a.m. Calgary, Alberta time. So, and when you register for one, you're in that section. You can't bounce back and forth, but you do have the choice. And so you can choose the one that's going to work the best in your schedule overall. And with that, oh, it's been fun. I've had fun. I hope you've had fun. I hope you've learned something. And I hope you are actually opening another window and registering for the November 29th webinar right now. And I hope to see you then. Take good care, and we will talk to you later. Bye-bye.